90 more days of emergency. Parliament extends St. James state of public emergency until May 2. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News on air and online at onespotmedia.com. I'm Archibald Gordon.
And I'm Doreen Samuels. Also this evening, Operate with Balance. Prime Minister Holness calls out Indicom on how it deals with police.
No comment. Security Minister declines remark on Quayler's departure.
Hitting back. Banned pastor makes scathing attack after he was taken off plane on way to Jamaica.
And in business news, looking overseas, 138 student living targeting regional universities for growth.
There's also sports commentary and weather in this newscast, but before the break, the feedback question.
This evening we're asking, do you share the Prime Minister's and the police view that Indicom needs to operate with more balance?
Share comments online, facebook.com/television Jamaica and tweet at Television Jam.
Stay with us. The newscast returns after the break. Welcome back to Primetime News. Special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com.
A reminder as well that you can watch TVJ live by downloading our One Spot Media app in the Google Play Store or the App Store. That's the number 1 followed by the word Spot and Media.
The government has used a maximum period under law to maintain the state of emergency in St. James until May 2 this year. It was initially declared on January 18 and initially should last no more than 14 days.
And as required by law, the House of Representatives this afternoon passed a resolution to extend the measure for another 3 months to clamp down on crime and violence out west.
So far, 10 guns, including high-powered weapons, have been seized and 51 persons have been arrested and charged.
The government also sent a strong signal that changes are coming to the law which governs the Independent Commission of Investigations. But first, the announcement. TVJ's Andrea Chisholm now joins us live.
Thank you very much, Archibald and Doreen. Well, for about 1.5 hours this afternoon, the atmosphere inside Gordon House was very cordial as parliamentarians debated the resolution to extend the state of emergency. 42 votes or a 2/3 majority of the lower house was required. But with the opposition unanimously supporting the measure, there were no problems for the government. As expected, 14 days was not enough for the security forces to use extraordinary powers to put a lid on crime in St. James. So in the House of Representatives on Tuesday, a resolution from Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
To have the state of public emergency and the emergency powers regulations remain in force until May the 2nd, 2018.
51 voted in favor and 11 members are absent. The motion is carried.
While we will support this, we urge that all necessary measures be taken to ensure that the situation is brought under control. The country needs a clear sense of direction which must be pointed to by the government that can give us comfort that there is a solution in train that we can all support as law-abiding Jamaicans who wish the best for our country.
With over 130 murders since the start of the year, the opposition leader reiterated that the state of emergency alone cannot solve crime. And the Prime Minister again underscored that the security forces will be targeting those who facilitate criminals.
As the intelligence picture is built, and not only perpetrators, but also we are building the intelligence picture on the facilitators as well.
So how effective is the state of emergency so far? In addition to the seizure of 10 illegal guns, 51 persons being arrested and charged, the Prime Minister said law and order is being restored to St. James.
The visitors are moving around quite freely. In fact, the harassment levels have dropped. The buses are able to move much quicker from the port to the attractions because we are seeing greater order, not just in pedestrian traffic, but in vehicular traffic through Montego Bay. So there are some positive effects.
All right, so Andrea, in all this talk about the state of emergency, one of the big issues is the abuse of power by the security forces. That's always been a concern. Was there any mention of the Independent Commission of Investigations, Indicom, the body which investigates the actions of the security forces?
Well, Archie, you will recall that the Prime Minister said last year at the JLP's annual conference that he believes Indicom sometimes goes too far. And that statement was met with criticism from both Indicom and other stakeholders. And today, both the Prime Minister and opposition leader made reference to Indicom. And the Prime Minister in his presentation sent a signal that the Indicom Act may be amended.
I've decided not to go any further with my comments on Indicom. I think this House, which created the institution, which still retains the power, at some point, and I suspect it would have to be sooner than later, we will have to take some decisions to ensure that that very important institution operates with balance.
While we urge them to obey the law, I want to urge those who investigate them, including Indicom, to be mindful of the circumstances in which they operate. If I can be blunt, if Indicom has a problem with the members of the security forces, I don't think they should disarm them in public, in full view of the citizens. There is literally a war that has been declared on society. And in that circumstances, you cannot weaken those who serve in the face of those who attack them.
And no doubt, Archie, we will continue to track the developments and keep the nation informed.
Thanks very much, Andrea. In the meantime, the Minister of National Security, Robert Montague, gave the country an update on the state of emergency now underway in St. James. Mr. Montague says the security forces have stepped up their search activities in St. James and neighbouring parishes.
There has been only one complaint about human rights violation. We have dealt with that. We have sorted out the situation with the detainees, and we have also made additional arrangements to house our people. The mantra of the government and of the security forces is that our citizens, even those who are being detained, must be treated with respect. Their human rights must be respected, and there must be a certain level of dignity attached to the process.
And at least one St. Elizabeth community is breathing a sigh of relief this evening following the intervention of the security forces in their area. One man who police sources say migrated from St. James at the parish is dead, while another is on the run. The incident unfolded in Kilmarnock, St. Elizabeth. TVJ's Janela Pursues has details.
Free at last, the sentiment expressed by most of the residents whom we spoke to in Kilmarnock, St. Elizabeth. For almost 2 weeks, they've been living in fear as criminals believed to have fled the police military operation in St. James have been wreaking havoc in the usually quiet farming district. The community is on the border of St. James, so it's no surprise that criminals would seek refuge in the area.
Here's them hold up couple somebody already in the bush, so I'm scared for going to the bush. Come here, so them a rob, take away people money and things like that. You understand? So, a couple, almost the whole district, citizens of the district, not going to go no, because we are farmer up here, you know. All of we have to say a farmer, nobody no employ outside.
It all came to an end on Monday. Residents alerted the police and from all accounts were instrumental in leading the security forces to where the criminals had sought refuge in the hills. According to reports, on approaching the area, the men fired at the lawmen who returned fire.
The police, they didn't do what they were to do because some of the citizens were working with them and they seemed like they didn't want to work with them. But after the soldier came, it was well done because when I said to them that the man was in the hill around there, corner the pole and go around there, because I stay here and I hear the shot. So I realized that they were there.
So they were firing shots in the area?
Yes, after the police in the bush there. Yes, shots were fired because both the police and the gunmen. But anyway, somebody called and said there was one going across down there. And I went to one of them and I said, somebody called and said one was going across there. And he turned to me and said, "Oh, you know, see a gunman."
In the end, an unidentified male was found suffering from gunshot wounds. His cronies fled the scene. He was found clutching a submachine firearm. The police also recovered 2 magazines containing 31 9mm rounds. A 9mm Browning pistol was also found in close proximity to the body. The police say that following further searches in the bushes, they recovered a 12-gauge shotgun with the serial number erased, 7 12-gauge cartridges, 2 power banks, marijuana, marijuana, 1 flashlight, 2 mobile phones, clothing items, 1 lighter and a knapsack. As for the residents, they maintain they will not allow criminals to take up residence in their community. Janella Precious, TVJ News.
The National Security Minister has declined to comment on whether Police Commissioner George Quayle was forced out of the position. However, he revealed that the process to select a Commissioner of Police will be changed as early as this year. TVJ's Shamela Mitchell reports.
News emerged late last week that Police Commissioner George Quayle will be stepping down as head of the Jamaica Constabulary Force on Wednesday after 9 months on the job. But in recent times, the relationship between the Police Commissioner and the National Security Minister appears to have been tense. On Tuesday, TVJ News asked Mr. Montague if he forced the commissioner to resign. According to Mr. Montague, that's a question for the Police Service Commission. Mr. Montague also declined to give an opinion on Mr. Quayle's replacement.
In due course, the country will be informed. I do not want to be accused of interference or having any intervention in the process.
Do you think now is a good time for him to step up?
The position I hold, I am not allowed the luxury of thinking like that and expressing a personal opinion.
There have been concerns about the high turnover of police commissioners since it was announced that Commissioner Quayle will step down. Mr. Montague says he too is concerned, which is why he noted changes are coming.
I am one of those who are in the forefront of making the call. And yes, I will not only make the call, but I will also be making positive action to have that dealt with the new merger of the Police Services Commission and the Civilian Oversight Authority, as well as with the new Jamaica Constabulary Service Act.
Mr. Montague says these changes could be as early as this year.
We have given ourselves 6 months to bring those pieces of legislation to the Parliament, but I must pause to pay tribute to my predecessor, Mr. Bunting, who also did some work on these pieces of legislation.
The National Security Minister made the disclosure to TVJ News following the handing over of 6 vehicles and bicycles to the St. Thomas Police Tuesday morning. Shamela Mitchell, TVJ News.
Our top story this evening, state of emergency extended in St. James until May 2. Still ahead, making peace with violence producers. The story from August Town. And in business news, 138 student living to target Caribbean universities for growth. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Continuing the news. The Peace Management Initiative, PMI, is this evening defending its role and importance in dispute resolutions in communities that have been plagued by violence. The response comes a day after Councillor for the Papine Division, Venetia Phillips, said she will not be part of any initiative involving criminals. PMI, along with other stakeholders, visited the Augusttown community today. TVJ's Anthony Lugg has that story.
A family mourns at this house in Bedwood Gardens, Augusttown on Tuesday. But on the streets, yet another walkthrough by the police, the Peace Management Initiative PMI, political representatives and other stakeholders, all aimed at ending the violence in Augusttown. And while that was taking place, a police operation underway backed up by heavy patrols. These peace walks aren't new to the Augusttown community, and so many have begun to question their effectiveness. That's because in some instances, stakeholders are meeting with the violence producers, a matter with which some have taken issue. In fact, at a meeting in the community on Monday, Councillor for the Papine Division, Venetia Phillips, made this comment.
From guy and guy, trade gun everybody wrong. Show me up to the license or take for yourself. So no wrong or right can't in a gun wanna trade bullets. So any meet no not gonna have when any guy if you say who wrong or who right, I won't be there.
But at Tuesday's walk through the community, the councillor was present. We asked sub-officer in charge of the Augusttown Police Station, Inspector Stephen Taylor, about the approach.
People tend to give different reaction about certain things, but meeting with violence producers, we are asking them to change their way of life or change the way of thinking, and a lot of them, they are buying into it. And we're getting good results.
Violence Prevention Manager at the PMI, Milton Tomlinson, stressed the importance of interacting with all members of the community, even the violence producers.
Perpetrator today, may very well be a victim yesterday. You understand me? So it is in PMI's business to deal with both perpetrators and victims. You understand me? We treat with an entire community because community will call for blood. And if you don't treat with the community, a community behind 5 guys will push them and things will happen out of control.
And for those who argue that the PMI should report these violence producers to the police,
we have violence interrupters, who works in the various communities. So it is not our business to tell police or turn over anybody to police. It is our business to have these guys to see things and do things in a different way.
But that's not the only issue which the councillor took issue with in Monday's meeting.
People are afraid to talk to the police? Talk to me. But just remember this, whether it's your neighbor, or you, or anybody else in the community, all of ever feel it.
We are seeking the citizens' assistance as much as possible. What you know, come and tell it to the police so we can use that to solve.
So at the St. Catherine North Police, Superintendent Ralsford Hardy is not worried. He says the police have been imposing curfews in areas where there had been flare-ups.
But the one I imposed in Jones Avenue was a tremendous success because, as you can see, nothing has happened. It is a tactics that we have used in the past to good effect, and we did so. And I can tell you, it gives you additional powers and you can restrict movements. And when criminals are moving around and committing crime, there's no better way to stop them than to restrict their movements.
But in other sections of St. Catherine North, the criminals are still on a rampage. In Linstead, 3 members from one family were killed over the weekend.
We have sat down as a management team. We are looking at different tactics that can be employed, additional resources for the area, and within a couple of weeks, we have identified some players, and once we get these players, things should be back to normal.
And now, there are renewed calls to residents in volatile areas, some of whom the police say are facilitating the criminals.
In any fashion or form, your silence tells you that tomorrow, today, later this evening, you will be safe. It does not guarantee safety anymore.
The citizens are not saying anything. I don't believe that there is a trust factor. If there is, I hope they come forward and tell us, because if there is a trust problem, we need to fix it. Because the trust that we expect to exist in this parish, it should be one that is profound.
Kalisha Williams, TVJ News.
Controversial pastor at the Faithful Word Baptist Church in Phoenix, Arizona, Stephen Anderson, has commented strongly on being denied entry to Jamaica following outcry from local and overseas activists. The ban comes after an online petition to prevent his entry into the country. TVJ's O'Shane Masters has the details.
No homos will ever be allowed on this church as long as I'm the pastor here. Never!
That was controversial pastor of the Faithful Word Baptist Church in Phoenix, Arizona, Stephen Anderson, in one of his church services several years ago. The pastor has been denied entry to South Africa, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Botswana because his utterances were deemed to be hate speeches. On Monday, Mr. Anderson was denied entry to Jamaica. However, speaking in a YouTube video, Mr. Anderson argued that overseas governments influenced Jamaica to take a hard stance, which resulted in him not being able to visit the island to preach. Mr. Anderson said he was about to board a flight to Kingston when he was informed he would not be allowed into Jamaica.
I'm pretty surprised because I've seen a lot of stuff online that said that Jamaica is, quote, the most homophobic country in the world. So it's pretty weird that I would be banned from Jamaica because of my views on homosexuality. But to me, it just goes to show that we're heading into a one-world government where individual nations, they don't really have any say over what they want to do. You know, a country like Jamaica that's supposed to be a sovereign nation, apparently they can't really do their own thing. Because obviously this is an outside influence from the United States or the United Kingdom or whoever is pressuring them or influencing them to be pro-homosexual.
The pastor has called for gay people to be stoned to death, once prayed for the death of former U.S. President Barack Obama, and has also said that a woman's place is at home, raising children, and not at work. The controversial figure has blamed the situation on a conspiracy.
They're just scared to death that I'm going to go there and preach the gospel and get people saved, and people are going to read their Bibles and listen to my preaching, and that they're actually going to have a view that's against homosexuality. They just have an agenda to cram that view down everybody's throat. That's the only acceptable view to them. The biblical view is not acceptable. You know, what the Bible clearly teaches in Romans 1, in the book of Jude, in 2 Peter chapter 2, Leviticus 20:13, you know, that's not acceptable to them.
The ban comes after an online petition by gay rights activist J. John, which collected nearly 40,000 signatures. He told The Guardian, quote, "This is a positive outcome in which I am very pleased," end quote. O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
The Urban Development Corporation, UDC, says it still has not made a decision about where will be declared Jamaica's third city. But the Manchester Chamber of Commerce continues to push for Mandeville to be declared the country's third commercial hub. The issue was raised at a recent Chamber of Commerce function in Mandeville, Manchester. TVJ's Vashon Brown has more.
The question of whether Mandeville in Manchester should be declared the country's third city was raised by the Manchester Chamber of Commerce last year. The group argued that Mandeville is ideally located in central Jamaica and is considered a commercial hub. The general manager of the Urban Development Corporation, UDC, Dr. Damian Graham, says there is still no decision about where the third city will be, but he says it cannot be somewhere that has frequent landslides or similar faults.
We've done our desktop research, which has essentially created a negative map where we have about 60% of the island that has been ruled out of where the location could be. But there are some very good candidates, right? And I'm happy to say that Middlesex has quite a few of them.
The Manchester Chamber of Commerce says it understands that more development is needed in Mandeville, like sidewalks around the town, which will provide wheelchair access. It has since set up a committee to closely look at the possibility of Mandeville getting city status. The UDC points out that there are several things to consider when one speaks about a third city.
Population is one. You have to look at education. You have to look at the strata of the population and what the main courses of business will be for that city. It is our view and vision that the third city needs to be a smart city, a technology-driven city.
In the meantime, MP for Manchester Central Peter Bunting says Mandeville has a public hospital and a number of tertiary institutions that makes it ideal to be a third hub for central services.
When you're talking about a third city, you don't want it to be in the metropolitan area of one of the other two. So, St. Catherine is already in the metropolitan area, and big parts of St. Catherine is already a dormitory for Kingston. So it don't make sense to put another city, so to speak, there, because that's already going to be served by the central services of Kingston. Similarly, anywhere close to Montego Bay.
Vashon Brown, TVJ News.
And time now for responses from our friends on Facebook and Twitter, and Archie is at the smartboard.
Thanks, Rain. Here's our question today. We are asking, do you share the Prime Minister and the police's view that Indicom needs to operate with more balance? Pauline Moore says, I can never share their views because they're both seeing out of them for them two eyes and I out of mine. The two of them probably have 20/20 vision. I suffer from nearsightedness. Hard to say what Indicom purpose is. And Kareem Sami says, not just balance, plenty of fairness as well. Before today's speech, it would seem like the simplest things the police do to a civilian, them get into trouble. Maybe that's why they've been anxious and motivated lately to only write traffic tickets. Give them some space to work, and then maybe the criminals will behave themselves. Alex Brown says, I believe that Indicom needs a holiday. That should account for balance. This crime situation needs draconian measures. We cannot use civility when you're dealing with uncivilized creatures with no respect for humanity. And our final comment is from Keneal Cole, who says, if the Prime Minister doesn't see the importance of Indicom, he should just say so and stop talking out of the two sides of his mouth. Indicom doesn't equal crime. Corruption does. Keep your comments coming on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/Television Jamaica and your tweets to @TelevisionJam. The Business Day and news from overseas after the break.